Welcome, everybody. No, this is not Breaking Point. This is Krystal, Kyle, and friends. We are in the Breaking Point studio today. Don't ask. A lot of stuff going on, wildness, madness behind the scenes.
It was just easier.
Just understand it. Perhaps things are not, as simple as they appear. Everything's always a headache. Everything's always, it's tough to make things run smoothly. Anyway, but this set's lovely and wonderful and beautiful, and so I'm happy to be here either way. Krystal, good to see you. I say that as if I wasn't just with you for the past, however many days.
Good to see you too, sir.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes.
So I'm excited about the show today. We're going to talk to Ari Rabenhoft. He just wrote a great insider's account of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Interesting thing about Ari is he's kind of out of DC world now.
Right.
And so he's pretty free to say what he thinks about the campaign, what he thinks about what's going on with progressives in Congress now, what he thinks. Really, he's a very interesting, insightful character about exactly how DC works.
And understand, we both, we're biased. We love Bernie Sanders. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. But I have my criticisms. I have my disagreements. And perhaps we'll put them
we'll
to
get
Ari,
into that.
who
No doubt about it.
was inside the belly of the beast. And he was with the man himself the entire time.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll push on some key strategic errors and other things. So we'll find out.
We'll definitely get to that. But we wanted to start with, obviously, the massive bombshell news this week is the leak of a draft opinion. Looks like the Supreme Court almost 100% sure to strike down Roe versus Wade.
Wait, what's Roe versus Wade? I never heard that.
You haven't heard of it yet?
No.
Google it while I'm talking,
Okay.
and then get back to me. Anyway, and in very strident language, in an opinion that, could even jeopardize the foundation of things like gay marriage and, put back in play, anti-sodomy laws and all sorts of things. So earth-shattering leak. And everyone has been reacting to this, including one Joe Rogan, who led his recent podcast with his reaction.
Now, I haven't seen this yet.
Yes.
So I don't know what the heck he's going to say.
Yeah.
All right.
So
go
let's
ahead.
go ahead and take a look.
So apparently abortion's illegal again, right? What happened?
What, here?
Did you hear what happened? Not just here. No, there's a leaked memo, apparently. Someone leaked something that says that they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. I don't know if it's real. Everyone's already commenting on it as if it is real. I don't know if it is real. But apparently what that means is that it's going to be up to the states. So people who live in states where abortion is already, like blue states, I don't think they have a worry. But other states probably do. It's kind of...
Hey, medical tourism.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's fucking weird, man. It's weird. People telling other people what they can and can't do with their body is weird because, Texas has a weird law. No, I shouldn't say a weird law. A terrible law where it's 6 weeks. Who the fuck knows they're pregnant at 6 weeks? You just missed your period. People
I just found out I had COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
That could have been a baby ago.
And girls who have irregular periods, that happens all the time, I think. I don't know. I don't have a vagina. But that's what I hear. I hear it happens all the time. And so for the longest time, people have dealt with that and just sort of live their life and take a pregnancy test. And now you find out that you're pregnant. You literally have a fucking week to find a place, get an abortion. If you want to get an abortion, make a decision. You have to make a decision, But the thing that I'm thinking of is people that have, if something happens to you, what if you get raped? What if anything like that? Or what if, some, a family member molests someone?
I used to have a bit about it, but it's a talking point. How should it be okay in cases of rape? That's like saying a fetus is a living thing unless his dad was an asshole.
Right.
How's it the baby's fault his dad was a
exactly
rapist?
Right? How is it the baby's fault that? But what if it's your father or something fucking crazy sick?
Yeah.
It's just I just don't like. I don't like people telling other people what they can and can't do. But it gets weird when the baby gets 6 months old. It gets weird when they're really, really pregnant because in some states, for the longest, I don't know what the rules are now, but I know that some states had late-term abortions, and sometimes you need one for medical reasons, right? The woman could die if she gives birth. It's a decision that people have to make.
Well, if you look back, what was your favorite part of being a fetus?
Well, what was your favorite part of being 3? Should I be able to shoot you at 3 because I don't want to take care of you anymore? It's one of those things. It's I am 100% for a woman's right to choose. but as a human being, just a person observing things, there's a big difference between a little clump of cells and a fetus with an eyeball and a beating heart. And for anybody to pretend there's not, you're not doing any
But
argument.
where do you draw the line?
Right, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the question.
So what do you think of that, Kyle?
So, first of all, I actually think he was very nuanced in his commentary
I think
there.
so too, yeah.
Now, I happen to have the statistics because I talked about this earlier when I was covering a different segment about Roe v. Wade. The Guttmacher Institute looks into this, and 98% of abortions, 98%, happen before 21 weeks. Before 21. 89% happen before 13. So in other words,
Wow.
it's really only 2% or even probably less than 2% that are actually late-term abortions in the country.
Yeah.
And the way it worked under Roe, for people who might not know, is they set up the trimester standard. And so for the first trimester, you have a right to an abortion. The government can't get involved and say you have to do this or you have to do that. You have a right because it's before a certain line. In the second trimester, states have the ability to do health regulations around it, but they can't ban it. Mm-hmm. In the third trimester, states are allowed to ban it if they so choose to ban it. So it's actually, in terms of, it's phenomenally nuanced is my point.
Yeah.
That they sort of parse it out and separate it and say, here's what's allowed in this line. And then they changed it later on in 1992 with, what was it, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, I think
Yes.
the name of the case is, to the viability standard.
Yes. And I think an important point that you're making there is that Roe doesn't actually have anything to do with late-term abortions because states already had the ability to ban late-term
Correct.
abortions if they wanted to. And I think, obviously, listen, the way that the right plays this is they use the most extreme examples.
And pretend like it's every abortion.
Pretend like it's every abortion, use that to, to sort of typify the movement. On the other hand, look, it's totally fair to say something, if you believe something is morally wrong, it's morally wrong whether it's 50% of abortions or it's 1% of abortions.
Yeah, so but I think that is really, really unnuanced for people to think that way because, first of all, the polls in the country are 58% think abortion should be legal in certain circumstances.
Yeah, but I'm talking about just with regards to late-term abortions. So you're making the case, look, I'm pro-choice, guys, so just to be clear, but you're making the case that, listen, late-term abortions only happen in this tiny percentage, so why are we even talking about it? But,
well, I'm not saying why.
If something is morally wrong, it's morally wrong whether it's happening to one person or whether it's happening to 100 people or happening to 1,000 people.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make is they're just not honest about that.
Correct.
They try to pretend like all of the abortions are late-term abortions when in reality, there's literally an abortion pill. It's not the morning after pill. This is different than the morning after pill, but there's an abortion pill which you take relatively early. And again, 89% happen before 13 weeks, 98% happen before 21 weeks. So really, in most circumstances, what we're talking about here is gametes and zygotes and pre-gestation fetuses and no nervous system developed yet, so no ability to feel pain. And to Joe's point, I actually think he's making a nuanced point that few people in this conversation make, which is, can we just acknowledge that these are different things, that it's different at 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 13 weeks versus, 8 months.
Right.
Like, that's a very, very different thing. And I don't think, particularly the pro-life people, they do not do. In fact, you'll hear them cite this, 60 million babies have been killed since whatever year. And it's like, you're just like straw manning what's actually going on here.
And again, when you're talking about Roe, you're only talking about those very early term instances because already states can, affect. I mean, it's really been kind of the wild, wild west. In a lot of states, it already is effectively illegal and impossible to get an abortion. But, you're able to impose all kinds of regulations, restrictions, and outright bans after the point of viability. So what we're really talking about with Roe is before the point of viability and these very extreme draconian laws and this is where it becomes relevant that Joe is in Texas now because they just passed this 6-week ban and it has all these.
Do they have a trigger law too?
I don't know if they have a trigger law.
I read one article said 13 states have it. Another one I read said 16 states have a trigger law. And for those of you who don't know what that just means that the second that Roe versus Wade is officially overturned at the Supreme Court, immediately abortion is fully illegal in a state. And even, I talked about this before, Louisiana, Krystal, is they have a bill that they're going to vote on where it would punish the woman as if she committed murder if she gets an abortion.
Well, Texas,
and then also the doctor who performs it would be charged with murder as well, charged with homicide. And so, like, now they're going super hard in the crackdown now. And actually, I agree with Joe. I think his position, he's taken the moderate position, which is the Roe versus. See, that's what nobody says. The Roe versus Wade position is actually the moderate position.
Correct. Yeah.
And I agree with Rogan's commentary on it. And I've always considered myself a moderate on the issue of abortion. You know, and so I think. And this is also very different from, he's right-wing on everything. Like, no, he's not.
Right.
No, he's not.
Well,
what are you talking about? He's clearly pro-Roe versus Wade. That's obvious based on
That's the other piece. So I looked it up. Texas has a so-called trigger ban signed into law in June 2021 would make abortions illegal unless the pregnant person's life is threatened or they are at risk of serious injury. That law would go into effect 30 days after the Supreme Court issues a judgment overruling Roe. And so that means in Texas, they have an exception for life and health of the mother, but not for some of the instances he was talking about, which is rape or incest. And, I do think it's instructive. Both, obviously, it goes against the notion that Joe is just like this consistently right-wing dude. And I'll be interested to see some of the reaction in the online sphere to his comments here.
There will be none.
Which are very
Because they only highlight when he says right-wing things.
Yes.
There will be no reaction. We're going to be the only people who talk about it.
Well, and
because we're the only people talk about when he says some right-wing stuff.
See,
and when he says some left-wing stuff. We talk about both, and most people just talk about the right-wing stuff.
And if the right acted the way the left does, they would clip out these comments and be like, look at this left-wing Joe Rogan hating babies and whatever. But no, they'll just not talk about this. And then they also will highlight the things in which he agrees with them, which is why this whole thing is ultimately so silly.
Now, again, what did we do? When Joe Rogan made a commentary against paid leave, what did we do? We came out here and disagreed with him and said, here's why we disagree with him. Here are the graphs. Here's the charts. Here's where this is already the law. Here's where it's not. We're kind of getting screwed in this country. He should support this. And by the way, he actually changed his mind on that after we did that.
Yeah.
So we talk about when he says right-wing stuff, and we talk about it when he says left-wing stuff because it's interesting, newsworthy, and we're honest. And I'm not, like, here's what Joe Rogan is. He views himself as apolitical. Now, he's not apolitical. Nobody's apolitical. Mm-hmm. Or, there's different degrees of it, but he's not apolitical. He views himself that way. But really, he's effectively a normie, and he's sort of a centrist because he's got some right-wing views and he's got some left-wing views. Now, most of his actual policy views are left-wing views, but in terms of, like, his focus and what he likes to talk about the most of those things do lean right because it's always, like, wokeness bad, cancel culture bad, yada, yada. So he's a mixed bag, and you got to take a mixed bag for what they are and be honest about where they are.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, bloviating about what the personal things that you find offensive about him and none of the positive stuff,
I also think his comments are reflective of where a lot of people are on abortion.
58%.
Yeah.
Agree with exactly that.
Agree with, his view, which is basically like, they're probably uncomfortable with late-term abortions. They feel like that is a different thing than early in the pregnancy. I mean, this is sort of like a way that a lot of Americans view the issue, which is not totally hardline one way or the other. So I think he's reflective in that way because it also shows that on this issue, and this is why Republicans actually don't want to talk about the decision, and they just want to talk about the leak because they know that they are wildly out of step with where the majority of Americans are. Because again, Roe is not about late-term abortions, however you feel about that. It is about these very extreme laws that have been passed in basically half the states at this point.
And also, to your point, you mentioned this earlier, the logic that's used in this case, there's a line in there that people have, sort of focused on, which was Alito saying, these are not rights that are deep-rooted in history. Mm-hmm. And by that logic, gay marriage, gone. Mm-hmm. That's not deep-rooted. It's very recent.
Yeah.
You could even argue interracial marriage, gone. I don't know if they'll go that far.
Right.
But certainly I think gay marriage is on the chopping block. You can bring back sodomy laws. Say, hey, let the states decide. You don't have a right to do certain sex acts. That's not what the argument always comes back to, well, that's not what the founders intended.
Right.
Okay, but then there's a larger conversation to be had about how do you interpret the Constitution? Are you still, in today's day and age, saying just what the founders wanted? That's all. That's the only thing we can think. Well, there's a lot of issues that exist now that literally didn't exist then because they never thought of it. We're talking about guys who wore powdered wigs and shat in outhouses. The idea that they'd have all the answers to the modern problems. So really, the way that I like to interpret it is look at the language and then a reasonable interpretation of the language given the modern context. So, I think people have a right to euthanasia, to physician-assisted suicide. You know, I think you can interpret that in the Constitution. I think that the general welfare clause of the Constitution basically allows for the government to provide for the general welfare of the people. I think you can make an argument that we should have universal health care because of the general welfare clause. You know, that you have a right to health care, like the French Constitution has a right to health care. You know, so I don't like when in this debate you have, like, the conservatives like to say, you know, originalism or textualism, you just go by the letter of the law. And any other interpretation except the one I have is illegitimate. Like, you're being political, I'm being constitutional.
Right.
No, it's a different interpretation of the Constitution. We're both being political, because everything's political, but we're also both interpreting the Constitution just in a different way.
I mean, I also ultimately think that a lot of these decisions, they just come down to whatever these people's politics are.
Always.
And then they make up the legal rationale to fit with whatever that is.
And everybody does
even in their like originalism or whatever, you know, there was an instance, I think it was Ian Millhiser who was pointing this out. Like, they ruled one way for a red state and their congressional gerrymander, but then they ruled against, like, for this, it shouldn't have gone the same way, but for a blue state and a congressional gerrymander that would benefit Democrats, that one they struck down, and it was like completely inconsistent. So I think you should just, I don't even think that looking or reading into their arguments is that interesting at this point. They're just doing what they want to do based on their political leanings and ideology.
Let me just give one more point to bolster your argument here, because I remember this with Antonin Scalia very well. So there was a case involving the border, I think it was in Arizona, where they wanted the right to build their own border wall. Now, the border is a federal border, so that's really the purview of the federal government. Arizona wanted to build their own border wall, and Scalia ruled, look, they have a right to do it. You know, states' rights. If they want to build it, they can build it. Who is the federal government to go in there and tell them how to run their state? On the issue of weed, when California legalized weed through the state level, he goes, no, supremacy clause, federal government overrides state government. You can't legalize that.
Right, of course.
So wait. In one instance, you're going states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. In the other instance, you're going supremacy clause, federal law is above state law. So federal law is supreme. Which is it? And the answer is, it all went back to his own political biases.
Yes.
And he just dresses it up in legalese